Hey there, it's Jennifer. This month at Simon Says Stamp, it's Die-cember. Basically, they're showing you lots of things that you can do with your dies and die cutting. Today I'm going to use some dies to do a faux letterpress technique where I can combine some watercolor. So I'm putting the two together, and I actually have 3 different card examples for you today, and I'll jump around through them throughout the video. And it just is a little variation on the technique in each of the different cards. Now you can do this technique with any wafer thin die and your die cutting machine. Any kind of die cutting machine you may have. I usually use the Vagabond. In this video I'm going to use the Big Shot, but you could use a Cuttlebug or whatever you have. So now when you're doing a faux letterpress with your die cut machine, you want to do it as if you were using an embossing folder. So on the Big Shot, I just have tab 1 down and the other tab is flipped open. On the Cuttlebug, you just use the plates that you would use for an embossing folder. But you need this embossing mat. Spellbinders has one, Sizzix has one, My Favorite Things has one, and you put that down on top of your cutting plate. So you see a cutting plate and then this embossing pad. Then you put your paper on top of that. I'm using some watercolor paper from Tim Holtz today. Then I have my die with the cutting edge down onto the paper. And then I'm going to put my cutting plate on top. So basically by having that little pad, that tan pad that you see in there, it prevents this from cutting and instead just makes the die press into the paper, doing a faux letterpress look. Now if you don't have this mat, you can try with a piece of felt or a piece of craft foam, but this mat is definitely something that's worth having. It's inexpensive and it's a great way to get more out of your dies. And you could do this on any kind of cardstock, but I really like it on watercolor paper because it's so thick. The results are just beautiful. So now that we have the wreath done, I'm going to set this aside. We'll add the watercolor in a bit. I'm going to go ahead and do all my other letterpress. So this is the heart tic-tac-toe die from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm putting it face down on the watercolor paper. Remember, the sandwich is a cutting plate, the embossing mat, some paper, the die face down, and then the cutting plate on top. You just do this exactly like you would an embossing folder. And there we have some hearts embossed onto the front of the card. The back is even cool looking too. And the last one we're going to do is this thanks die. It's a new big thanks die from Simon Says Stamp. Doing the same sandwich here, putting it down onto the watercolor paper. I'll put a link here to another video where I did this faux letterpress technique to do a simple frame on the outside of a card. So you can take this technique and keep it quite simple, but today I wanted to show you a variation where you add some watercolor. But look how pretty that is, how you get that deep impression. Now you'll notice that sometimes on a die there, the edge of the die leaves an impression too, a little bit impression. What I do there, you can kind of see it there, I just take my bone folder and rub the side of my bone folder over that to smooth out those areas where there's a little bit of impression where the edge of the die kind of presses into the paper too. This doesn't happen a whole lot. If you're getting a lot of this extra impression from the edge of the die, you may want to use less pressure through your die cut machine. So maybe remove a shim. Just play around with it on some scrap paper, and before you know it, you'll get the right amount of pressure for great results. Okay, so now it's time to add some watercolor to our impression. I decided to use distress markers for a few reasons, but you could use other products too. The reason I use distress markers is because it's got a fine tip on one of the ends, which is great for tracing in these indentations. So I'm just taking the tip of my marker and just drawing right along the impression that's left by that die. It's really easy to do because your tip fits right into the impression. Now by tracing with the distress marker, and then when I go back in with a wet brush, I can turn this into a watercolor look between the lines very quickly and easily. However, if you don't have distress markers, you can use any kind of other watercolor marker, or you can use watercolor pencils or whatever else you might have. This just is quick and easy to do. I love distress markers for many things, and this is a great technique for them. So I'm just going to go ahead and trace all the way around in green, all along those indentation lines. You could in fact leave it like that and not add the water to it and just have the crisp outline. It looks like you hand drew it, but it has that impression too, so there's some depth to it. I decided to go ahead and add the water. So I'm just taking a wet brush here. You can use a water brush. I actually couldn't find mine on my desk, so I'm just using a regular paint brush here. And you'll see I'm just touching the marker as I'm painting in. And every time I touch the marker, I actually pick up some of the color. So you can see I'm lightly filling in with some color. Just by filling this in with water, that the marker kind of bleeds into it. If you want more depth to that color, you can scribble some marker of the same color marker onto your craft sheet and pick some up with the tip of your brush. This is the Mowed Lawn Distress Marker color. It's like a Kelly green. It's just beautiful. But you can see I'm keeping it very soft by just using a little bit of water with that little bit of marker that I traced on the inside of the impression. You can see the impression in the video much better than in the photo. It's just gorgeous. So now it's time to color in those hearts. I'm tracing the outside, the little indentation, with my picked raspberry distress marker, and this is going to give a soft pink to it. So you'll see here, as I go in with some water and kind of pull some of that color in towards the center, you end up getting a very soft pink. I decided I wanted to get this more vibrant, so I'm actually scribbling some from the brush tip of the same marker onto my craft sheet, adding some water to it, and painting it on. So I'm just kind of making my own watercolor here. So I could do this on if you don't have a craft sheet, you could do this on a piece of plastic or empty wrapper, anything. You can mix some colors on there with your distress markers. So there I'm going to go ahead and do all of the little hearts, and you can see we end up with this great watercolor letterpress look. So now let's go on to one of the other cards, and I'll show you some tricks that I did with this one. This one was very simple because I just used the one die, and I'm just going to add a rainbow of colors. So you can see here I have a variety of distress marker colors. And this is so easy and quick to do. I'm just going to go along and trace the impression of the die once again. I'm starting with the picked raspberry, and then I'm going to move on to, I think, the dried marigold, then the mustard seed, then mowed lawn, and then peacock feathers, and then salty ocean. So I'm just going to kind of let them blend as I go. So I'm doing a little bit of each color, and I usually try to kind of stop at one of the letters, the beginning or end of one of the letters, and overlap slightly so that when I go over it with my wet brush, it allows the colors to kind of blend in between. So just quick and easy to do. Now after I did this, I thought, you know what, I should probably leave this without watercolor in it. I think it'd be great just to leave as is. So you could do this with any type of marker or any type of colored pencil. You don't need to add the water to it. And I think this would be a really cool result. It gives the look of letterpress without, the fuss of letterpress. Especially if you used a lighter color ink, you could get a really cool letterpress look. Now you notice there I was hurrying and I accidentally went outside of the indentation. You can see that purple line there went off the edge, but that's okay. I do this kind of stuff all the time, and thankfully I'm working on white paper, so I'll just take my white pen and just scribble over that, and nobody will ever know. It's a great way to hide little mistakes. Nobody will ever know. Easy to do. And so I think it'd be cool if you left it like this, but of course I tend to take things too far, so I'm just going to go in and trace along with a wet brush. This time I didn't add any color. I just took the wet brush along and traced through the outline that I did here and picked up all the color from the pen that I added here. So that was very soft bit of wash in between the lines, and I just allowed the colors to blend every time I overlapped. Since this card's pretty simple, if you wanted to add some shimmer to this, you could add a little Perfect Pearl pigment powder to your water or something with shimmer, so that when you're filling this all in, you're actually adding shimmer too. So there's the watercolor effect you get with this letterpress look. And then let's move to the watercolor on the third card. I thought the design was pretty simple with these 9 hearts, so I decided to actually add 2 colors to each heart. So I'm actually going to trace the outline of the heart with 2 colors on each of the hearts. So this one I'm doing peacock feathers, and then on the other part of the heart I'm going to do the mowed lawn. So there's actually 2 colors traced on one heart. And again, I'm just going to go in with a wet brush, and here you're going to see that I actually spend quite a bit of time touching the edge where the color is and pulling it towards the center. The more you do this, the more color you're going to draw out and the more watercolor look you're going to get. So I did all the top where there's blue, and now I'm moving down to the area where there's green so that I can allow the 2 areas to kind of overlap in the center. And if you keep going, your color gets more and more vibrant, and you could always add color if you wanted to by picking it up with the wet brush. So there we have one. Now for the other hearts, I'm going to do half the picked raspberry and half with dried marigold, so I can get kind of a 2-tone color there also, a little bit of pink and a little bit of orange. I think this technique would be really fun if, say, you have a large like floral die. You can do the stems and such in green, and then you can do the flowers in maybe pink and orange and just kind of let the colors blend in. You get a great watercolor look, but instead of just a flat card, you have this bit of dimension too. And then for the third color combination here, I'm using the Salty Ocean, which is a great blue color, with the shaded lilac, which is kind of a bluish purple. Now I did these 3 color combinations and I just repeated them for the other 6 hearts on the card. So you can see combining watercolor with faux letterpress, you can get great color and great dimension. Now I wanted to show you how I did the hello die cut on 2 of the 3 cards that I made today. The thanks card didn't need it, but the other 2 I wanted this hello die cut, but I wanted it to have dimension so it stood up. It's hard to put some foam dots behind this tiny little detailed die, so what I did is I die cut it 6 times and I glued them all together on top of each other. So I put some glossy accents on top of one, and then I put another die cut on top of that. Now you'll see you kind of have to fumble with it at first, but because the first few die cuts are so thin and flimsy. But once you build them up, it gets a little sturdy, so it's easier to glue one on top of another after that. After I've glued 5 or 6 layers together, I put one last coat of glossy accents on the top of it, and then I put my die cut that I want to show. I use some die cuts with a view glitter paper. This is like a very subtle glitter paper that doesn't rub off, and I put that die cut on top. So it's white on the sides, but that glitter paper's on the top. I just love the look of this, and this is a great way to do a die cut embellishment that really stands out. So I wanted to add this really thin die cut to my card. The way that I do this is I put a thin layer of glossy accents on the back, and then I use my tweezers. Since this is a really thick die cut, I can use my tweezers kind of on the side here and hold it. And then I can figure out exactly where I want it, kind of hold it right above my card, and once I have it where I want it, I just press it down with my fingers and let go with the tweezers and just hold it there for a couple minutes and you're good to go. Very easy to do. So that wraps up the heart card here. Now for the wreath card, I did the same thing. I just used a darker silver paper and layered up some hellos behind it. Kept that clean and simple. Now I decided I also wanted to add some shimmer to the watercolor, so I'm going back with my Wink of Stella pen to just add a little bit of shimmer to all the hearts on here. It's hard to see in the video, but in person it really kind of catches the light and adds just a little something to it. So there you have an idea for combining watercolor with faux letterpress to get some color and dimension. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again in the next video.